Hi, I'm Andy Mack from Akai Professional. I'm here today with DV247. I'm going to be giving you an exclusive overview of the new MPC Renaissance. So why did we make the MPC Renaissance? Well, we wanted to make sure that the end user had an integration between his computer and the hardware, hence why the MPC looks like the way it does. It gives you that classic MPC rugged look with all the classic features like the note repeat, the quantizing, we have the drum layering and many more features which we'll go through today. So let's have a closer look at the Renaissance now. Now, as you can see, we've taken some of the classic feature sets from the original MPCs. So if we start on the right-hand side, we have our 3000 transport control. We move up, we've got hot cues for every other parameter within the software, which can be accessed from the hardware. So we never need to actually physically touch the software program. We have a full screen view here, which will move through half screen and full screen on the software. And then we have our main parameters on the LCD screen. Now, the beauty about this is it keeps the workflow exactly the same. So we can look at every parameter, we can look at our WAV file editing, all from the LCD screen on the Renaissance. Then we can move down, we have our classic MPC pads. Then to the left of that, we have 16 cue links. Now, these will correspond with everything that's going on inside the software. So if I'm in Program Edit and I want to start layering all my samples, I have hot cues here where I can change my samples, I can tune them, I can deal with the volume control across each layer. So that's a really, really nice feature. We then have our note repeat and our raise, and then moving to the top is one of the main features on the hardware is our vintage mode. Now, because the Renaissance has its own built-in audio interface, it gave us the ability to simulate the same sound as the MPC 3000. So when you start off in this mode, we go to 3000 mode, we can then move down to MP60 mode, which makes the Renaissance 12-bit. Then we can go to other, where we'll be doing emulations of stuff like SP1200, etc., etc. So that's basically a look on the front of the hardware. And what we'll do, we'll move around the back. We have two mic inputs here and phono inputs for your turntables, because the one thing with the Renaissance, you can also sample through it as it's hardware. And then moving along, we have stereo outputs, and we also have a mix outputs, which are assignable. So if you want to use some of your outboard compressors and EQs, you still can. We also have 4 MIDI outs, because one of the things that the software does, it enables you to also drive your MIDI application. So if you've got some motifs or tritons still in the studio, you can run a MIDI out straight from the Renaissance and sequence them in the software. We have 2 MIDI ins, SPDIF, and then we have 2 USB hub ports. So if you have some library content on hard drive, you can plug it straight into the Renaissance. It will come up on the browser, either in the software or on the controller, and you can access your sample library that way. So let's have a look at the software now within the Renaissance. Now, the software is very intuitive. It's a very, very simple layout. You're not going to be going through multiple screens like some applications out there. So let's just go through the different windows that are available. Now, the main window you're going to be working from is the main here, which gives you your drum grid and it gives you the layout of the pads. So this is where we assign all the samples. So the left-hand side is our library content, which you can have hot cue points for library content within the Renaissance or on the software. So I can simply go to the hardware here, I can select which folder I want to access, and it will move through my library very quickly. And then I can search via sequence, via program, or via sample type. So at the moment I'm on sample. I can move down and see what programs I have available, and I can simply just drag them onto the pads, and then it will load up my sample data. So then I can start programming from the hardware. Once I've done some programming, it will be entered on the drum grid, as you see, in segments, and I can see that either in full screen or half screen. Then also it tells me the bar parameter, how many bars I'm on at the moment, how many bars I wish to use. It gives me time correction, which corresponds to the quantize and the note repeat within the hardware. And then it also gives me the MPC swing of where I am. And at the moment I'm on 50%. And as you know, that will move up to 75%. Then moving down to here where we have track data, this is quite important because at the moment I'm on track 1 and it says instrument type, and that's MPC mode. But if I change that, I can change it to MIDI mode. So like I said earlier, if I'm using a motif or a triton, I can now tell it what MIDI port I want to drive the software out. And again, all the content will be recorded in the grid area as if I've recorded it inside the software. And then going one step further, if I open up plugin, I can now open up all my virtual instruments. So if I've got stuff like a Gladiator or a Nexus inside, I can now open those up within the software and sequence those into my MPC groove as well at the same time. So it's a very comprehensive window. I'm not changing any parameters here, and I'm not going through multiple windows to access that much content. Then if we go to Program Edit, this gives us the ability to look at all the content of the samples. So now I have my layering. So if I want to layer 3 or 4 different kicks onto one pad, I simply do that from either the hardware or from the software. So if I hit this pad here, I've got 4 different kicks, and I can simply go into them and change them very, very quickly just by snapping that. And there's no other software programs out there that give you that kind of speed for manipulating your samples in real time. And then we can tune, fine tune, level, velocity, pan. Then here, filter type, we can select from our 26 filters and choose what type of filter we want, which is relevant to that pad. And then we have over here to the right, LFO, velocity sensitive type. And then this is the main section here, which is called pad insert. Now this again is relevant to each pad. I can now go into my plugin files, and I can load up any type of plugin that I want per pad. So this is one of the Abbey Roads. So I pulled up one of their EQs, and I've now got that direct on my pad 1, so I can then EQ my kick drums, and I can pick another 3 types of plugins to put to that one pad, and I can do that across every single pad. Or I can select the same amount of plugins per program or per track. So it gives me so much more mixing inside the box. If I then go to Program Mix, I can then control my levels of each program and add my compressors and EQs per program again. Then I can go to Track View, and then I can control the individual levels of the track, and I can also insert another 4 plugins per track. So you really have massive amounts of control. And then when we move along, we can look at our Track View. So this shows me what's happening on that track and what data is on that track. And then you can see a clear indication of what's happening in your environment. We then can go to song mode, and this just tells us how many bars we're using on this particular song. And at the moment, I've only got 2 running because I've only got 2 elements of the groove. Then for live, we can use this part here to actually access new sequences. So if we've recorded about 7 or 8 different sequences, we can actually trigger them from the pads and tell it what sequences we want to trigger live, which is quite a nice feature. We then go to sample record, where we can sample externally through the Renaissance inputs, or we can resample internally if we've done some plug-in EQs and compression with some of the drums. Then we can go to sample edit. Now, again, this is a very, very important page because we can look at the Renaissance and we can control our sample edit either from the screen, via the mouse, or from the controller. I can find my cut points, and then I can normalize, fade in, pitch, reverse, and time stretch. Now the time stretching is one of the most important features that people have requested, which again, a lot of other programs out there that deal with drum programming don't offer time stretching. And this is one of the things that has been classic from Akai for about 25 years. And then one of the newest features we've just implemented is the ability to chop samples in a very clever way. So if I just select a loop of some sort, here we go, so here's a loop. What I can now do is tell the Renaissance to chop this in 3 different ways. So I'll go to chop mode, and it will auto detect all the slice points, and I can do it via threshold, regions, or via the BPM of the loop. So let's just take regions. Now, I want to slice it 16 times, or I want to slice it, say, 8 times. And once I've done that, I want to hear what the samples sound like before I make a program. Well, all I need to do now is hit audition, and now all the slices are on the pads straight to audition. And if I'm happy with the slices, I can then send that to a program and continue with my beat. But all this can be done live whilst you're still programming. So you never have to physically stop programming on the Renaissance. I can physically come out of my beat, go into the sample edit, chop up my samples, audition them on the pads, chuck it into a program and finish making my song. So it's a very, very fast workflow. And then moving out of that page, we then can go to pad mute, where we can mute pads live. So if we've got about 10 or 12 different tracks running with different elements of the beat, we can program this live and work out what our drops are going to be if we're creating a fill. Then we have our track mute, which has been classic for many years. Again, once you get to the end of your composition, you can then break down the elements of the song without having to reprogram and use the track mutes to build up your song data. And then finally, we have step sequence. So if you don't want to play in real time and you want to do everything via the pads, you can use the light color, the light coordination and do everything in step time. So that's kind of a brief walk around the software. But the final thing is, once you've finished your programming on the Renaissance software, we can go to MPC, File, Export, Audio Mixdown, and then we can do a separate track bounce where it will take every single separate track that I've put into the software and bounce it down in different formats: WAV, AIFF, MP3, 24-bit, 48K, whatever you choose. And then you can take your whole project, put it straight into Pro Tools and finish your mix. But one little trick I will show you, which you will find very, very easy for when you're programming drums, is if I want to layer my drums, we can do it either via the program edit way, or if I simply just take a sound, hold down Command, pull it down, and now you see the 4 different layers on the pad, and I can just drop my sample in. So it's a very, very easy piece of software to continue your MPC workflow inside the computer.